Welcome to the Shop System DECODED podcast. In this podcast, we talk with the makers and the operators of today's greatest shop systems. My name is Fabian Wesner. With me is Tim Niemeyer. Together, we are Rock, a consulting boutique specializing in guiding companies through complex e-commerce projects. Today, we welcome Sebastian Rindom, who is the CEO and co-founder of Medusa, a very popular open source shop system. We will speak about Medusa's product and market and deep dive into the technology. Seb, it's a pleasure to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm Sebastian. I'm originally from Copenhagen, where in my childhood room, I started playing around with computers and found a lot of joy and creativity in that. And as I grew older, that eventually became the career path that I wanted to take. And throughout my studies, I started finding opportunities for building things that people like to use. So it was sort of in this journey that I eventually stumbled upon Medusa.
Okay, how exactly did you stumble upon Medusa? So why did it happen? Why did you create a popular open source shop system?
Yeah, so we during university, one of my friends and I started an agency where we worked with companies that were on many different shop systems. And our task was always to sort of customize something. It could be a bike shop that needed a configurator for their customers to choose their handlebars and tires and stuff like that. It could be a grocery chain that had opinions about the algorithm that fulfilled orders to always sort of choose the optimal location. And all of these customizations and sort of specialized needs were our task to sort of figure out how can we introduce those into whatever stack these companies were operating. And we found that a lot of the time there were elegant solutions that we could think of, and they were often quite simple to also go about and start building from a logical perspective. But when you started looking at the APIs of the platforms that companies were using, or sort of the combination of tools that were part of their stack, you had to sort of start being a bit creative, pull data out from the shop system, push it into some custom application that you had to build alongside that system, then do your customizations and then feed that data back in. And this is sort of like a common pattern that we encountered a couple of times. And you can imagine that the first time it happens, it's okay. You can sort of get around with it. But when you start having 2, 3, 4 of these custom applications, it can become really hard to maintain and hard to reason about the system. So the sort of sad conclusion to all of these situations was that a lot of the companies sort of stagnate and start trying to avoid introducing customizations and really stop trying to seize the opportunities that they see. And we felt that there was an opportunity here to actually build something that didn't have to be super complex. It just had to cater to the audience that could actually introduce those elegant solutions that I talked about. And that's sort of the developer in this equation. So Medusa was built on the idea that we want to give developers core set of commerce functionality, but then on top of that, give them tools to orchestrate those pieces of functionality into custom workflows or integrations with other systems. And that's sort of the foundation of Medusa, is like core commerce logic and tools to orchestrate and customize the logic to your needs. And back in the agency, it was really when we started having this tool forming in our hands, it made us a lot faster. We could build more things. And so it became pretty obvious that this was something that could have a huge impact on the industry. And we decided to put it out there and make a company around it.
I guess the shop system that people used at the time mostly was Shopify, right? Or something Shopify. So something which was SaaS. So it's totally fine as long as you use the existing features. But if you want to break out of it, they cannot do stuff, right? They cannot extend their business because the system is limited. right? And then you need something where you can touch the code and just build whatever you need. Makes totally sense. That story is not so new, to be honest. I mean, there are shop systems more than 20 years, and there are always systems that are closed source that give you everything for no effort. You do not need developers. And then there are more modern systems that give you that access, right? I mean, there was back then there was Demandware, a closed system, and then there was Magento, one with an open code or open source system. So the story repeats. Interesting. Okay, about Medusa or Medusa, what does that name mean? Can you please explain a bit?
Yeah, so Medusa is a figure from Greek mythology, which got its head cut off when it died, and sort of there's the headless sort of connotation there. But yeah, at this point, it's really just a name, and it was a suggestion from one of our earlier customers. So that's a bit of the backstory there.
Okay. Yeah, it's a figure, right? That loses the head, and yeah. Okay, cool. And now, so you created it out of a specific demand. So you work with closed source systems and needed flexibility. So you created it for yourself, so for your own agency, but now it's open source. And how you want to proceed with this? So what is your overall vision?
Yeah, so the whole open source angle came sort of pretty naturally to us. Like we'd started working with the tool ourselves, and obviously having the access to the code was a big win for us in terms of both being able to build additional things, but also being able to understand the behavior of the system itself. When you write some code a month ago, you tend to forget what exactly it does after some time. So that was really helpful. And we had some friends that wanted to try it out as well, and we were pretty open with just giving them access and experimenting with it themselves. And so open source initially was this sort of shortcut to being able to give that developer experience that we had to others. And so the whole open source angle was really a question of like, how can we get this into the hands of other people as quickly as possible?
Okay, but that was like the past, right? But what is your future, your vision for the future? So how?
Yeah.
So you want to build a unicorn company out of it, or what's the plan here?
Yeah. So obviously, like once we'd done that and sort of seen that others were also interested in using this tool, we sat down and we were like, what should this be like? Should we just try and get more customers into our agency and sort of leverage that we have this tool, or what can we do about it? And one of the sort of conclusions that we drew here was that the SaaS model that dominates today is likely going to be a bottleneck for future growth of the digital commerce space. And to sort of dig into that a bit, if you have this fixed set of workflows that the SaaS providers, they solve and they fix for you, then every time that you go outside the boundaries of those workflows and want to do things that is a bit different, you're going to have trouble. It comes with a cost. So you have to give up some flexibility, and that has a cost. You'll be willing to accept that cost sort of exists, because the alternative cost, which is building from scratch and sort of customizing everything, is much higher. But at this point, we're sort of at a stage where companies will continue hitting these limitations of the platforms, and at some point the costs sort of exceed what it takes to build from scratch and sort of do the customizations. And so we sort of looked at it and said, okay, we have an opportunity here to introduce the tool that can allow digital commerce to continue expanding if we can bring down the cost of building these customizations to the point where sort of this SaaS inequality flips around. And so a lot of that sort of conversation analysis was like, okay, there's a big opportunity here. We can really make an impact with what we built. So that was why we sort of decided to build a company around it, raise money for the project, and obviously, like, we want to be the next big platform.
Yeah. Makes totally sense. I like that sentence that you said that SaaS is a bottleneck or can be a bottleneck for future growth of for shop. That makes totally sense, and I can totally relate to it. It makes everything simple at the beginning, but then at some point maybe you're restricted because you cannot do stuff.
Yeah, and I think, and we sort of see this as well. Like for some segments of the market, what we do doesn't make sense at this point. We make sense where you have custom needs, where you have requirements that other platforms are typically not capable of handling, and that typically comes at the higher end of the market. If you're just getting started and sort of just setting up your first store and don't have a lot of opinions about what it actually takes to sort of operate your business well, because you haven't learned that yet, then SaaS is a great sort of tool to get you started. Obviously, over time, we want to bring down the cost of getting started with Medusa too, to the point where you can start with us from the very beginning. But right now, we sort of found a sweet spot in sort of this higher end of the market, typically B2B companies that have specialized needs that are challenging to implement in any other way.
Okay, we'll ask you a bit about the market in a few moments, but let's briefly talk about Medusa as a company. So, who are the founders? When was it created? How many people are working there?
Yeah, so we're three founders. Ollie, who I ran the agency with, and then Nicholas are the two other founders. And the team right now, we're about 20 people. Have a very sort of heavy engineering focus. So all of us are engineers.
20 engineers. No sales team, I guess.
Well, we're slowly sort of getting there, but we have a pretty big focus on like we want our team to be engineering focused. And typically the people we sell to are also engineers. So that's a big part of it as well.
Okay.
So Sebastian, thanks for sharing that so far. So we already discussed a little bit about the company, so using it, that they're mostly B2B businesses having complex needs themselves that you need to cater to. Shopify, like SaaS business, like SaaS shops are not an option. Beyond that, I assume that Medusa's key customers, like the ICPs, the ideal customer profile, is different from commercial shop systems. Also because how you're describing Medusa is basically you're coming from a developer's point of view and their challenges and how you solve them, compared to if you talk to commercial vendors, they basically come with visions, how you can use their system, like their composable systems, to do something sophisticated, how they can bring the business to the next level, and so on and so forth. So I really like your approach. It resonates a lot with me as being a former developer. So how would you describe in more detail the ideal customer profile? Like, for example, like would you always need your own team? Like what are the sizes of business we're talking about? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So typically what we see is that the companies we work with have, as I mentioned, the requirements that are not easily solved in other systems. They will also, most of the time, have developer capabilities available either in-house or through a partner. And they come to us because we have a set of tools that developers can sort of combine to solve these specialized needs. Typically, what we see is that the SaaS inequality has sort of flipped when you get to, let's say, $20 million of revenue and above. There are some companies that experience it much early on if you're in a specific vertical or a specific industry that hasn't sort of been catered to directly yet. But the common thread is that developers can see how the tools we have can solve a lot of different requirements. And this is obviously a lot more horizontal in the approach than what you would typically see in other among other vendors. But our intuition here is that if we can ally ourselves with the developer, they can contextualize the value that Medusa can bring. And so the dynamic we typically see is that a developer will learn about Medusa and find us either via X or GitHub or whatever, and they will start playing around with it and bring it into to the conversation in the companies they work at, and slowly we sort of we get our chance to sort of win cases that way through. And most of the time, the business people that we interact with are happy to see that a requirement that they couldn't previously solve is now capable of being handled. And so, yeah, I think developers have gotten a lot more to say in that process than what has historically been the case.
Okay, that's a very interesting point you're raising here, which is like you have a very different sales approach compared to commercial vendors, because if you are what I've seen in reality is basically if you are a business which is looking to launch an e-commerce shop or replace an existing shop, it's a very business-driven decision. So basically what would happen is some big companies reaches out to a vendor like Commerce Tools, probably also you at this point with your traction right now, to Commerce Tools, with Spryker, to Scale, maybe VTEX or ACL, whatever is there. And then you have a call to salespeople and to discuss on a sales level, basically how the two companies can work together, which resonates with this, like big companies look for their kinds, like their counterparts, like birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. For you, it's very different because it's not top down, it's rather bottom up, right? That's how I see it or how I understand it.
Yeah. So I think we do have a bit of both. So what you're explaining with someone reaching out and sort of wanting to learn more about Medusa is something that we do every day. We speak to companies that have reached out to us in this way. But what it typically takes to sort of understand how much value Medusa can bring to a company is this notion of like how much more efficient a developer can be. So typically we try and bring in a partner early on who can contextualize our tools for that individual case. We don't try and sort of go out there and say like, check off all the boxes on the RFP and then sort of tell you that we can do everything. We kind of tend to be more, we tend to think that it should be a developer or partner that really showcases how those requirements can be solved. And then we of course work with these partners very closely through different channels. Many of the customers also have premium support deals with us, so that we can be involved and make sure that our tools are used in the right way.
When you say partner, you're referring to web development agencies or development agencies, integration partners?
Exactly. Integration partners, implementation partners, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Do you also do projects yourself? Like, do you have a development team which basically can facilitate developments?
No. So we don't do any hands-on coding. We do architectural guidance and sort of assistance with using our tools in the right way. But all the implementation work is left to either in-house teams or implementation partners that we work with.
Understood. All right. So I understand the journey, that it's a lot of replatforming projects which you're having. So basically there is some kind of shop existing already, likely a Shopify, because you say companies that outgrow the SaaS space basically come to you. At that point, I could imagine a company is not only talking to you guys, to Medusa, but also talking to other vendors out there. I mean, I named a few earlier. How do you differentiate from these other vendors?
Yeah, so I think the big thing that's different about Medusa versus other vendors is that we have a framework for customization, as we call it. And really what it is it's a set of tools for developers to introduce custom API endpoints, custom data models, modify the behavior of different workflows, and introduce custom workflows as well. And that's really not something that any other vendors have. Other vendors take the approach of saying, we have these particular workflows that we solve really well. And if you want to do anything else, you're left on your own. And you sort of have to figure out how to integrate a third-party system with us and sort of do all these things that you might want to do. And one of the insights that we had back in the agency was that, whether you like it or not, you're sort of operating a microservices stack when you're working in digital commerce. You have many different tools that you need to align, and your own customizations are also put in the mix. And if
like which tools are you referring to? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, it could be like a CMS tool or an ERP system or PIM, all these different tools that serve a purpose individually, and you need to sort of align them and make them work together in the correct way. And no one has sort of been able to say, or no vendor, shop system vendor gives sort of opinions about how to do that and make sure that those integrations work well. So you end up in this situation where your development team or the implementation partner you work with need to come up with first, what programming language should we use for our custom code? What should the folder structure be of our project? What should the code conventions be? All these things that are really sort of almost dumb and insignificant decisions, but they take up a lot of time in a developer's mind, and it also introduces a lot of sort of the maintenance burden of maintaining a system like that over time. What we do with Medusa is we give you all of that out of the box. We say, okay, we've made decisions about how you introduce custom data models, API endpoints, et cetera, and that takes away a ton of work that developers would spend maintaining stuff, and reallocates that to saying, okay, what are the business features that we need, and how can we implement those quickly?
Yeah, I would like to give a quick response on this. So I guess in the agency before you created Medusa, you worked mostly with Shopify, right? Maybe other SaaS systems. Mm-hmm. But what you said, the advantages of being able to change the code, and there's architecture that tells you how to change workflows, how to integrate other tools, how to change layout, etc. I think every other open source system has that.
Not only open source, actually, also an SAP Commerce would claim that.
Yeah, of course.
Because you have access to the code base, so you can do whatever you want. But the difference here is, it's what you say, Seb, what you're describing, it's more of a framework. I mean, we cover that in the deep dive, in the technical deep dive at a later point. But I think that is the biggest difference, because I think we are all aware, if you go with one of the more mature vendors, it's not only that you have a lean code base where you can build what you need, but you basically get a whole bunch of code. You need developers which spend weeks with onboarding only. Yeah, apart from the fact that they are likely more expensive.
Yeah, when you look into studios like a PHP-based shop system, right? It's already like more than 10 years old. They probably would tell you exactly the same story. Let me emphasize what makes you more unique than this is the technology set. So using extremely modern technology set. It's full JavaScript and I think also TypeScript now these days.
Yes, that's correct.
I think this is.
I want to just add one comment to the sort of other open source vendors. Most of the time, what they allow you to do if you need to customize things is that they force you to sort of fork their repository and then introduce potential changes. Our model is a bit different in this regard, because we ship a framework that sort of has opinions about, or like Medusa in itself is really just a Node.js project with a Medusa package installed. And from there, you can sort of introduce the customizations as files into this system. So you're not really touching the Medusa code itself.
You're not taking the core.
No, exactly. You're not going into the core and...
Of course not.
And making changes there.
That's a pretty normal architecture approach. I think the real difference is that you're using very modern technologies right now. But the architectural thoughts, considerations that you just explained, this is something you would also hear from a Magento architect, to be honest. So that was not so unique. But the difference is really in the technology stack and the approach.
The way that most
language.
People I've seen use it, though.
Yeah, they hack it. Of course, sometimes they hack it. That happens. Okay. But I think we got it.
I mean, to be fair, you can always do both ways, right? I mean, just recently we talked to SAP Commerce, and they also have a very sophisticated like base layer, and then they have recipes for different use cases. Reality is, and then extension concept, reality is still people hack their core. So even there, we're like a lot of abstractions, but once you have access to the source code, you find ways to do that. And if people do so, I mean, they should be aware of the consequences.
The trick is to let people allow to extend the core, but still being backward compatible. This is the hardest thing you can imagine in the architecture question. Yeah, but we'll come to this later. I think there is something to discuss about backward compatibility.
So let's park the technical deep dive aside for maybe 5 minutes. Or Seb, is there something you want to add here? I see you want to talk.
I think it's good. We can come back to it later.
Yeah, we should, because it's important once you have access to the source code to discuss basically architectures and what the additional complexity of having access to the source code, how it like outweighs, like how you have way more benefits out from that. So can you share a few more examples? Like who should use it? Like what's the best one? We talked about complex business models. We talked about rather like, I wouldn't say like enterprises, big companies, but companies of some certain sizes. What else do you think is important? Like who should definitely have a look at Medusa?
Yeah, so I think anyone should take a look at Medusa. It's a cool piece of technology, but obviously I am also aware that there are companies that benefit from using Medusa and companies for which it probably doesn't make sense at this point. I think some of the cool use cases that have spawned from what we've built has been things that wouldn't traditionally necessarily be treated as e-commerce or be categorized as such. We've worked with Heineken, for example, who's built this distributed platform where all of their distributors in Asia are logged into the platform, and they can then place orders on behalf of their customers. And this allows Heineken to both sort of centralize all those workflows around handling distributor orders, and it has saved them a lot of manual work. It also allows them to surface offers that are available at a given time and sort of personalize the experience that way. So this is not really something that would end up in the traditional e-commerce world. We've also seen SaaS platforms, for that matter, being built on top of Medusa. So there's a B2B SaaS company called Catalog that offers tools for smaller companies to operate their wholesale channels. And all of the commerce logic that powers that platform is built with Medusa. And they've then built customizations on top to sort of verticalize it for their specific niche. And while these are use cases that sort of come out of this idea of having a tool that's horizontal and sort of general purpose in a sense, it's been really cool to sort of see that people can put it together in that way. Of course, we also have a ton of more traditional e-commerce cases, but these are maybe some of the edge cases that are a bit interesting as well.
What I find super worth mentioning also was the POS solution. I mean, I saw a blog entry where someone built a POS solution for a mobile phone, it was, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
For the cashiers to check out an order in a store.
That's right. So yeah, we have Tekla Fabrics, which is a Danish home textiles brand. They opened their first store. They've been on Medusa for a while. They were actually one of the first customers back in the agency days. And so all of their direct-to-consumer operations are happening through Medusa. And when they opened their first store here, they wanted to make sure that they could have like a unified experience. Instead of going out and choosing a POS system, they just build an application that interfaced with the same APIs that the website does. So,
well, it sounds a bit awkward because at first you're like, okay, there is so many existing POS solutions out there. It's like, why would you do that? But on second thought, it's like, okay, all the customers who bought online have access to their vouchers and gift cards. They can redeem it there. So basically,
exactly.
There's a lot of integration work by this POS solution, which you can likely skip.
Yeah, and it was quite impressive how quickly it all came together because it was really a question of building the application. All of the backend work was already there. So very little integration work had to be done. It was pretty straightforward. I think the only thing was like an integration with a terminal, the Stripe terminal, so that they could process card payments.
So you mentioned Heineken earlier. How do such big enterprise account come to Medusa?
Yeah, so it's as I mentioned before, it's really a developer-led motion. So someone in their team had found Medusa, and they had a project coming up where the requirements didn't really fit any of the existing commerce platforms. And yeah, the that sort of made the whole thing click for it.
So you mentioned before that there's use cases which you should not, or where people should not use Medusa. Like, what do you have in mind there?
Yeah, so I think there is an obvious dependency on a developer when you use Medusa. You need someone to help you get started and set up the code base and deploy it to infrastructure and that kind of stuff. And that by itself rules out many of the sort of early cases. So if you're just getting started selling something that
selling your socks online.
Yeah, something that is an early business, you probably benefit more from using a SaaS vendor that can, give you a set of opinions that are good to begin with, and then as you learn what are the nuances that are specific to your business, and you sort of find the limitations of your platform, then over time it can make sense to look at something like Medusa.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the tech. So Medusa is a product for developers, right? So it's selected by developers, it's used by developers. So what's your technology stack and architecture? Could you please give us a bit of an overview here?
For sure, it's quite simple. We have it's all Node.js based with TypeScript. And then we have a dependency on Redis for caching and some of the workflow tooling and that kind of stuff. And then Postgres has the database. That's sort of the very simple overview. If you sort of dive a bit deeper into how we've architected the solution, we have a couple of layers. There's an e-commerce framework, or it's actually more general purpose than e-commerce, but it's like a framework for introducing API endpoints, custom business logic, data models, that kind of stuff. We use that framework to build commerce modules. So out of the box, when you start Medusa for the first time, you get 18 modules that are pre-built for things like managing inventory, calculating the total of a cart, understanding taxes, payments, orders, customers, all these things that you expect from a digital commerce platform. And then those pieces come together in an admin dashboard that's also pre-built and customizable. And then sort of the final layer is starter kits that we build to sort of get you started quickly with a storefront and different use cases.
Okay, so this backend application, this Node.js backend application, why I wonder is why you did not use any framework like Nest.js or Donus or some of the other Node.js frameworks. Why did you decide to build it from scratch? Isn't that a lot of work initially?
Yeah, well, it is a lot of work. I think there are sort of two reasons here. One is that we have opinions about what we think is a good developer experience, and if we want to introduce that with sort of our own opinions in mind and making that come to life, then we sort of had to take control and not lean against other frameworks that are already out there. So that's one part. Then the second part is that many of these tools are purpose built for some of the things that you do in commerce. So one thing I alluded to earlier was this notion that whether you like it or not, you're sort of operating a microservices stack when you're working in digital commerce. You have all these different purpose-built tools, PIM, CMS tools, and ERP systems that all need to work together. And so we've built tools that sort of help you do the networking between these systems and help you align systems and make sure that the data is consistent across them. One of these is like a workflow tooling, which is called a durable execution engine. But essentially what it does is it can help you construct a set of steps that have to execute. And if anything fails along the way, then we can allow you to either retry the step. So let's say that you're doing a mutation in a PIM system and it fails, but you need that data to be there, then we can retry it. And if it continues to fail, we can roll back any steps that have happened before that. So again, let's say that you've created the product first in your ERP system, and then it needs to go to the PIM. That'll probably be an awkward order, but let's say that was the case. Then we can actually roll back the creation in whatever other tool that you've been using.
Okay. So it's not only shop system, it's also kind of orchestration layer.
Exactly. That kind of stuff.
Okay. You mentioned these 18 modules. I think when I look at the documentation, there are more things that you can add on top, right? If you want to build a B2B shop, for example, I think not everything is there out of the box. So how does that work?
Yeah, so it is, when you spin up Medusa for the first time, you can run a command in your terminal, and then within 5 minutes, you sort of have a fully fledged e-commerce platform that can do all the things that you'd expect of a commerce system. The modules that we have are sort of all there in the default sense. If you want to introduce additional features, then you can install additional modules. So things like, for example, we have a B2B starter template that has some pre-built modules for handling quotation flows and company and employee management and spend limits and stuff like that. And those are then additional modules that you can install into your code base. But the 18 modules that I refer to are sort of the default case, and then you can add on top of that.
And these extra modules are also always implemented by you or by partners, or
no? So they can come from either us, they can come from the companies themselves. So in your Medusa project, you can introduce a custom module. They can also be made open source by the community or partners that we work with. We have a partner who's built a set of modules for managing marketplaces, so introducing that type of functionality around vendors and within a marketplace and splitting orders between those vendors and so on and so forth. And so the whole ecosystem is sort of built around introducing these additional pieces of logic in that sense.
One question just for clarification. You mentioned earlier, I think it was plugins and then now modules. Like, is it the same term or same thing, or is it like different, and how is it different?
Yeah, so it gets a bit nitty gritty here, but plugins are essentially a package that you can install that contains both modules, but also additional logic. So it could be API endpoints. Let's say that's the case. The module themselves are self-contained pieces of software that just takes care of the data model and the business logic related to that data model. Yeah, plugins is typically what you install when you extend.
There was also the term recipe. I think that's more like a tutorial, right? How to do something. That's
right. So in our documentation, we have recipes for how you can actually build custom functionality for a specific use case.
Okay. Technically, these modules are NPM packages, right? Is that correct? Or is that copied into your project code?
It's NPM packages.
It's NPM packages. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's all Node. Is it? I think it's TypeScript, right? It's not JavaScript.
It's TypeScript, yes.
Okay. That means obviously you need a team of JavaScript developers, TypeScript developers. Do you know how big these teams are usually? Is it more like two people, 3 people, 12, 20?
Yeah, well, we've seen teams of many different sizes use Medusa. Typically, it comes down to like what are the complexities involved in what you're building, and how fast do you need things to move. Some of the agencies that we work with, implementation partners, are allocate one developer for a project. If it's a smaller one that needs to be put up in a month's time or something like that. And then we have large companies like Heineken that has a team of, I think, about 10 developers who are working on their platform and continuously adding new improvements to that code base and all that.
You recently made a big release, version 2. Could you please explain what is the difference between version 1 and version 2, and is there a migration plan for existing customers?
Yeah, so as you sort of have your code out there and people using your stuff, you obviously find that there are are opportunities for improvements. And one of the things that we realized that we needed to embrace more was this notion that things should be decoupled completely. So your order module should not interact with data from any of the other modules, because if you do that, then you start having dependencies that are hard to reason about. It's hard to introduce new features, and so that was something that we had in V1, and it was a bit of a constraining factor on how fast we could move. It was also a constraining factor on how customizations were being built. So when people customized things, they could actually end up in a situation where it would be hard to take new upgrades from our side. And so the big change in V2 is really that we have moved all these dependencies, or removed them all, to a point where the order module is now completely independent. So is the product module. All our modules are. And all the interactions that happen between them happens in this workflow layer. And what that allows us to do is that every time we build something new, an improvement to any of our modules, people can take those updates without any issues. And so that's like the architectural change here. Obviously, there are customers who are on V1 now and have sort of used that architecture and build customizations in that sense. And we're trying to help them now move over to V2 and take those learnings to formulate a sort of more generalized migration plan for everyone who's on V1 now. It's not going to be like push of a button and then everything works. There will be a little bit of code modifications, but we've actually found a path that does be straightforward.
Did you change the data schema a lot? The database schema?
No, the database schema is mostly the same.
Okay, that's good.
It's really more a question of, do we allow things like foreign key relationships in the database?
Do you? Do you have a relation between product and order?
Exactly. So we used to have that. Now it's that relationship is no longer strictly enforced by the database.
So if a soft relation now, I mean, you still need to know which product is sold, right?
Absolutely. But we've implemented a different mechanism to do that. And again, it also introduces some new possibilities for people that are using V2. You can incrementally adopt our modules now because they're independent. So if you want to start using our promotions tooling, you can do so. And then over time, you can introduce additional tools. Another thing that's neat is you can replace a module completely with a third-party tool. So if your PIM has high enough rate limits and is useful for sort of all the product operations that are in Medusa by default, then you can build an interface or build a wrapper around your PIM system and just allow Medusa to interface directly with that instead of synchronizing data into our database back and forth.
I will definitely dig into the code here because I'm a big fan of modularity. I would really like to see how you solve the details, but that's too much for this podcast.
I have one question for V2. So basically what you're saying now is that the different services are decoupled. Like I imagine that to be like some kind of like microservice, like it's a module application you're having, but so I imagine it to work like similar to a microservice environment where you then have this orchestration layer. How does that work? Is it like a bus system, or how can we like technically this orchestration layer, how is it working?
Yeah, so basically it's the orchestration happens in workflows. So as I mentioned before, a set of steps that have to execute, and if something fails, we retry or roll things back. That's where the orchestration takes place. Out of the box, we have a set of workflows that we have pre-built and sort of, so when you add things to cart, for example, what we'll do is we'll go and ask the product module, give me the data for this variant. Then we'll create a line item in the cart module, and then that sort of completes the workflow. or there's also a step to ask for the pricing information from the pricing module. But so these three steps have to happen and have to succeed. And if something fails, then we can retry and so on and so forth. So all these workflows are sort of there out of the box. If you want to introduce your own workflows, you can use the same workflow tooling that we use for the default ones to build integrations or to build custom operations that have to happen. And really, the workflow just asks each of the different modules to do an action, and combines the data in the way that is necessary for the workflow to work correctly.
That was not there in the V1, right? That's the main difference, correct?
Workflows were there in V1,
but not for everything.
But we didn't use it out of the box internally. So now in V2, everything is a workflow.
Okay.
We also have workflow hooks, so you can actually jump into a workflow and say, okay, I don't want to allow this line item to be added, so I throw an error and sort of fail the workflow.
Okay, good. So what you give is a headless shop system, but people still need a storefront.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I mean, end customers don't care for the backend; they need a nice, beautiful storefront. So what is the most common approach here? Do people build it from scratch? Do you have a Kickstarter or something?
Yeah. So what we see typically is that people build from scratch, and
really?
we have a starter template that people can sort of use to see the different patterns that you'd have in a storefront when it's interacting with Medusa. But most of the time we see people use a framework like Next.js or Remix, and then they build the storefront to fit their needs from that sense. Usually they'll also use a CMS system like Sanity or something like that, and that together sort of allows them to build the storefront experience.
Okay. But you're also investing into the storefront, right? I mean, if I would build a new shop and you have a storefront that gives me like a 90% ready to go shop, I would use it. I mean, why would you build it from again?
Well, it's again a question of like, many of the requirements that people have when they come to Medusa are not requirements that are sort of easy to reason about up front. So while there might be parts of our template that people can use, there will often be sort of these workflows that are not really common, and so that requires customization, typically both in the back end, but also in the front end. So yeah, we see people typically build from scratch. There's also there are many different tools that you can put on top of Medusa to sort of have more of these like drag and drop type experiences.
Yeah,
but it's we try not to have too many opinions about it. We do offer some starter templates to help you get something up and running quickly, but which part of it you use is kind of up to you.
Which I can totally understand. I mean, opinionated is a big thing. I mean, especially in front end, there's so many technologies you can build upon. I mean, you said React yourself and Remux, even Angular sometimes. So whatever it is, and you cannot build Kickstarters for everyone. Plus, it's getting like Kickstarters for each of these frameworks. Feels like it's getting a commodity. Like Versal even has its own commerce starter pack. Like, why do you want to compete with that? I mean,
yeah, there's plenty of options out there, and I think it's a problem that we will allow someone else to.
Makes sense. Okay, then the next concern people have to deal with is hosting. So what's your approach here on hosting? Does everybody need to create your own account on I don't know, Heroku or some other path, or touch Kubernetes to run Medusa?
Yeah, so actually we have a product called Medusa Cloud, which allows companies to take their Medusa project, connect it to a platform, and then we provision and manage infrastructure for that project. So we spin up servers and databases and stuff like that for you. The neat thing about this experience is that as a development team, when you're building, every time you do a git push, you get a new deployment. When you open a PR, We provision a preview environment for you so you can easily validate that the things you've changed actually work as they're expected to. And so Medusa Cloud is still a fairly new project or new product, and we're sort of slowly onboarding people onto it. But it's really the best way to a Medusa project. Historically, other companies have used tools like Heroku and AWS and other cloud providers. So Medusa is very much self-hostable, but the experience that we strive for is to make the Medusa Cloud the best platform to host Medusa.
Totally. I would always go to the vendor. If the vendor offers some hosting, I would probably always choose it, because why would I deal with that? I need to hire DevOps and take
exactly.
care, and then stuff will break at night.
Exactly, and that's also partly why we chose to build the product. There's also other things that we can do with sort of Medusa Cloud. A big thing is like having pre-built integrations for some of the standard things that you might expect. So payment integrations and so on and so forth is something that we can. Go ahead.
Do you have ecosystem with partners, like with, I don't know, Stripe and Algolia and all these typical pieces
right now
that you put in every shop?
It's still very young. We're still sort of putting it out there and manually onboarding customers at this point. But the plan is to over time have a pretty wide ecosystem of integrations that work with Medusa Cloud out of the box.
Okay, so you're working on this, right? So this is like that's coming the next years probably, right? All these partnerships. That's also. I mean, I can tell you from a vendor perspective, this is effort. You will need to have some person in the company just maintaining these partnerships. It's a full day position. It's like okay.
So let's dig a little bit deeper here into the company business model. I mean, basically what you just said is there is what's the business model behind it? So basically everything is open source. It's a very generous MIT license, meaning everyone can use it. It could contribute, but doesn't have to. It doesn't need to attribute it. So basically I could copy it and use it for whatever reason, right? So you're certainly not making money there, because it's a very, very fair open source license. So how do you currently make money? What are your plans beyond?
So Medusa Cloud is really the monetization model here. We think that, so first and foremost, like we think that the cloud is a pretty important part of the total product suite. One thing is building your customizations and building your sort of your commerce platform. Another thing is like operating it and putting it into production and maintaining it over time. Medusa, the open source project, very much takes care of the first part. Medusa Cloud is what's going to take care of the second part. There are companies previously that have been fine with doing this themselves, but as I mentioned earlier, our goal is really to bring down the cost of building these custom applications. So the operational side is really important as well. And we think here there is we can offer a very great experience for teams and companies that work with Medusa that other providers will have a hard time to sort of replicate. And so that's sort of the foundational idea here. Once we have the infrastructure in place, that also opens up for additional opportunities for us. So we can introduce things like, as I mentioned before, integrations to different tools out of the box. There's a possibility of having paid modules that either we or the community can build. There's additional tools that are just nice from a developer perspective, like observability and sort of analytics and stuff like that, that we can build into the platform because we have control of the infrastructure. And so those are some of the things that we want to explore over the next year as additional monetizable channels for us.
That makes perfect sense. As Fabian said already, I think when it comes to DevOps, it's probably one of the tasks which take a lot of time, not only to build it initially, but also to maintain it. And it's very expensive to have the DevOps to do that, but also second, by using the best hosting solution out there, like which you're building with the cloud, just makes sense to keep the productivity at maximum, because otherwise having development instances and bringing these up and so on and so forth, people waiting for DevOps because something is broken. I mean, there's a lot of hidden costs which you can just avoid. So as Fabian said, I would always go for the vendor with the hosting.
Yeah, and really like this whole preview experience that we can build is pretty amazing. Like every time a PR is open, we will spin up a new environment. We'll branch data out from sort of like a development database. So you have a fresh set of data that you can modify and delete from and create additional entries into. And once the PR is merged, we bring all of that down. And so that sort of flow of really being able to validate quickly that what you think you've done in the code is actually working the correct way is really a massive productivity booster.
And optimistically, you like a DevOps would look at that and say, oh, well, it's easy to do and fast thing to do. Realistically, it takes super long to get that done right, right way. Beyond, by the way, one remark also, it's just fair if you receive the whole system for free to then give back to the community and to give back to you basically a little bit of money for the rest. Like, why did you went open source? Like, did you like understand the previous point that basically you have a valid business model here? Was it a longer discussion or like was it clear right from the beginning?
It was pretty obvious to us that we needed to do, we needed to do this in a way that gave the developer experience that we had when we built the solution in the early days to others as quickly as possible. And being open source was a great shortcut for that. I think over time, there are also some other considerations that are interesting from a strategic point of view. We can offer total cost of ownership when you have Medusa up and running is a lot lower than many of the commercial products out there that have really high license fees. And so there is an opportunity for us there to sort of go in and undercut the market, but capture a larger part. So that's another sort of thing that's nice about the open source model. Fundamentally, I think as AI becomes better and sort of more powerful, I think a lot of the open or a lot of the software layer is also going to be less valuable. So we try and make sure that the iteration cycle of having an idea and putting that idea into the world is as quickly as possible, and that's the part that we want to monetize. The software itself and the logic itself is something that is not revolutionary.
And also, like worth mentioning, you took it to the very extreme, right? With the MIT license, so no Apache license, also no double E folder where you basically have some enterprise modules you have to pay for, but literally everything is out there under MIT, which is one of, if not the most permissive license out there.
That's correct.
Second question going to a similar direction, which is you received funding a couple of years back. I think it's $10 million roughly up to this point. Was that also clear that you're basically working on a startup here, you take external money and or like, was it clear from right from the start, or was there a turning point?
Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, like we there was this point in time where we obviously had the software in our hands and we felt like we'd built something pretty great. And we tried to analyze what is the opportunity here for us. And as I mentioned, the SaaS model from our point of view is likely going to be a bottleneck for the future of what's going to happen now, both because of how the e-commerce landscape itself is becoming more competitive and people are no longer sort of treating it as a secondary channel that they sort of are playing around with, and that requires more differentiation on the merchant's part. So there's a higher demand for customization, a higher sort of interest in specializing things, but also from a broader perspective of how AI is going to influence the future. I think there is there is going to be a future where, you can almost open up your Medusa project and sort of prompt your way to the workflows that you want to see in your platform. And those things are going to require more specialized controls than what you'll see in sort of a SaaS offering. And so that opportunity is interesting, and we want to go out there and beat the market as it is right now.
One remark here. The first time I came across was actually when you did pre-seed investment. I think it was 2021. Because of a couple of common contacts invested in Medusa. I actually checked it out back then. Was at a good impression after all. It was like, okay, yeah, totally understood the reasoning behind it. But very honestly, like now 3 years later, a little bit more than 3 years later, it's I think you're playing on a whole different level. I mean, the developer experience, what you have here with the blogs, the recipes, and so on and so forth. I think there's really a lot of maturity what happened in the past 3 years. Given that you're not much older, when was the company founded again? Which year? It was 20.
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing. I don't recall. I think it's 2021, when we raised the pre-seed.
So it was super fast development, actually. It's a very broad system at this point. So, respects.
Well, I'm happy that you can see that. Thank you.
Okay. So developers are using Medusa all the time, and how do they talk with you? How do they talk with each other? Is there an official community channel somewhere?
Yeah, so obviously there's a GitHub repository where people can open discussions and report bugs and stuff like that. We have a Discord channel where it's more casual and you can go in and chat and showcase your projects and plugins and whatnot. And then of course, like if you have a commercial case in mind, we have a contact page on our website that people can reach out through. Yeah, those are sort of the main channels. Of course, the X profile at Medusa.js is also worth following if you have an interest in what we're doing.
And how much do you involve your community into your roadmap? Do you vote for new features, or is that completely decided by you and then people?
Yeah, it's a topic that's been sort of debated a bit internally, how we do that best. We've tried with sort of voting. We've tried with managing a public roadmap. Most of the time, because things change so rapidly, it does become hard to sort of have that in place and have it up to date at all times. So we try to inform people about what's happening and what work is going on. But we generally make the decisions about what to build ourselves.
Yes, I think that's right. This is not democracy here. It's like
Exactly.
You are the owners of the thing. You spend your own time.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the full context. We have the vision about what we want to do, yeah. And so the community is a nice input at times, but most of the time we just try and inform what's happening and not take too much input from them. There is of course like a slight nuance to this, which is some of the larger companies that are using us have developers who are now very competent in Medusa and the code base, and so we do see some contributions from time to time from these teams with improvements to the code base itself, and we value that a lot. It's really great to see that people can come together and sort of help make the product itself better, but the bar to make those PRs land is pretty high. So it does take a while before people are able to do so.
Nevertheless, you have like 270 contributors at this point. Despite the high bar, there's still a lot of incoming PRs.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is good.
Okay, at the end of this podcast, let's have a quick look into the future. So what are your plans? Would you like to share a bit about the roadmap and what's coming next? Is there version 3 coming up, or do you go more to B2B marketplaces, or so? What's on your roadmap?
So some of the big things that we're going to be focusing on here is around starter templates and specifically in the B2B space, lowering the sort of initial hurdles of getting started with Medusa for B2B. Then, of course, there's a lot of work going on the cloud platform and making it ready to a more broader group of customers. and those are sort of the main focus areas for us at this point. And all of it is really informed by this idea of like bringing down the cost of building these customizations. That's what we try and follow.
Makes total sense, especially the B2B angle. I mean, the most uncommon shops are in the B2B space.
Exactly.
Because here it's always different, and there you need a system where you can touch the code and change things. Amazing. Very cool. It was a pleasure to talk to you. We got a lot of information from you. It's an incredible journey what you're doing here. When somebody's interested and want to talk with you, what's the best way for people to come in touch with you?
The best way is to reach out on X at @Rindom. You can DM me, throw a comment out there, and I'll be happy to respond.
So great for helping us here and coming in. It was a pleasure to talk to you. As I said, it was very different from the other podcasts we've been having so far. Pure pleasure to meet you and to learn more about Medusa.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.